Leone, improving the social and economic impact of energy investments. So as you will probably know, this is one of the 6 projects underway in Sierra Leone under the Energy and Economic Growth Research Program. And this is the only transdisciplinary research project looking at the social aspect of the energy system. The other 5 are very technical in terms of what they're trying to understand, specific pieces of the technological system, either the grid or the generation side, economic aspects of the energy system in Sierra Leone. This is driven by the fact that Sierra Leone expects, or at least before the COVID situation, was expecting significant investment from its donors in the modernization and increased access of their energy infrastructure. And a large section of the decision makers want evidence as to how those investments can be optimized to create, and stronger linkages can be created between energy investments and socioeconomic impact on different communities in Sierra Leone. So there's a threefold objective of this research. The primary question that we are approaching is to find evidence on how social value of energy is created at present or can be created in the future, given the different contexts around the country. The second is to, in the process of doing this, we develop transparent and replicable methods to be taken up in future, and so that others can carry on this kind of research-based evidence creation in the country. And third is to assist the uptake of the research-based evidence that we create and make that useful for decision making and lay out translation pathways for decision makers to refer back to. So these translate to 3 distinct and interlinked tracks of our research. The first one is data collection, creating a database of how social value of energy is created, what impedes in different situations. So for this, we are using a mix of interviews, surveys, focus group discussions, targeting people in their homes, in their businesses, in public places. And this was originally planned to be carried out in 5 different locations around the country. We have managed to complete 1, and we are working on how to adapt this to the emerging situation right now. The second track is capacity building, where we have invested significant time and resources in creating capacity amongst local researchers, as well as some of the staff from our stakeholders over the course of time. So we have invested time in training our research team, which are usually young university graduates and professionals, and training them in research ethics. We have invested time in how to do qualitative data collection, do interviews with people in different contexts. The third track is to enable research uptake and decision support, and this is one of the key focus and something that we have invested significant thought to, and how do we create this. So we are engaging with the top leadership of the stakeholders, which includes ministers and the top bureaucrats of the country who are relevant to energy, finance, planning, economic development. Then at the second level, we want to engage local regional stakeholders who are relevant to the local transition, and at the operational level, we are engaging mid-level executives in these stakeholder entities to create a continuous knowledge exchange mechanism. We considered that the top bureaucrats and ministers would not have the time to engage with us once every 2 weeks or every month. But we wanted to keep the momentum going so that the orientation to the concepts and the transparency to the work that we are doing does not come as a surprise to them. So a strategic decision was to engage with mid-level executives in national and regional stakeholders to have that momentum going. So in the first instance, when Malini and I first visited, we literally just traveled around from office to office, speaking to different people and asking them to participate and seeking inputs on what would be best ways to engage them over time, over the course of this research. So all of this, the three different tracks and the need for creating capacity and research uptake boils down to the idea that we have always envisioned this project as a co-design and participatory process, where each phase, from the scoping and engagement to the actual data collection to the final synthesis and uptake, involves multiple levels and layers of interaction with our stakeholder groups and seeking inputs and providing feedback and also getting feedback on our plans. So this means that we collaboratively thought about selecting research sites. We sought inputs on the questions that need to go into a survey. Is it culturally appropriate to ask certain kinds of questions? Our local partner, CRCB, were instrumental in helping us frame the questionnaires, because some questions are simply not culturally appropriate given the context of Sierra Leone. So those kind of exchanges have been very valuable in designing the entire research project. The individual pieces, beginning from questionnaires to selection of sites to having representatives on our side and informing us, providing us feedback as to what is the appropriate way of doing this research. Now, here I would focus on some of the aspects that were important in terms of communicating the idea that the energy poverty nexus is not a technological problem. So one example in the preliminary scoping phase that we did was to create a map, a multi-criteria comparison of the different socioeconomic indicators across the country and correlate that to the existing energy infrastructure. So we sourced 12 different data sets that represented the livelihood practices, sociocultural groupings, infrastructure and financial inclusion status of different regions of the country, indicators of poverty, geophysical characteristics, etc., and layered them onto a map of energy infrastructure that we created by sourcing primary data from government and private developers. And that brought up a picture as to how energy systems and patterns of poverty, inclusion, exclusion, and deprivation happens in different regions of the country. So this was a powerful tool in communicating to our collaborators. It might seem very obvious to us who engage in this discourse of understanding energy systems and poverty as from a socio-energy system perspective. It's not very intuitive for people who are deep into the practice of energy systems. They look at it through a technology lens. So this was an important step in demonstrating that this does not come, it's not purely a technological question, but it is a confluence of multiple factors. The more practical outcome from this was selection of our representative study sites. So we identified 5 different sites which represent the situation in the country where we could do our research, conduct our research, and make reasonably well-informed observations about the energy poverty nexus and transition pathways. In terms of data collection and analysis, we have focused on differentiated data collection for each layer. So for the user layer in identifying social value of energy, it's a data intensive process where we are conducting hundreds of interviews and surveys in homes, businesses, in neighborhoods. We are asking people questions about places that are relevant, that are that they visit, like markets, schools, transportation hubs, how they see the future of those community spaces evolving with the assistance of energy services. And we are also understanding the ecosystem of energy businesses in different neighborhoods, how they fit in to the uptake and the increase in energy demand and better usage of energy to convert it to valuable outcomes. For the second layer, we are engaging with the service providers, looking at their operational practices, their human resource and enterprise setups, the skills and capacities they possess, and their relationship vis-a-vis customers and the local economy. And at the third layer of policy and regulatory actions, we are engaging with the stakeholders, but we are also depending on secondary sources of data in terms of published reports, vision documents that these entities publish from time to time. So I share some preliminary results from Freetown. This is where we have completed our first set of data collection. And you can see that we have identified different microcosms in the city, where we have used this idea of energy poverty nexus, the map for the country that you saw. We have shrunk that down to the neighborhood scale and identified patterns of energy poverty nexus based on the particular socioeconomic, cultural characteristics of different neighborhoods in the city. So we have identified microcosms that are, for example, the largest one, the Grafton microcosm, is a suburban area which is populated mostly by migrants from other parts of the country, and they engage in multiple jobs. They have some sustenance agriculture going on in their community, as well as they have other jobs. Then the Wellington microcosm is a mostly industrial district. So people have full-time jobs in the manufacturing and the shipping sector in the country. So this was our criteria for identifying different microcosms and then selecting the number of samples. So we have, so this is over 300 samples that we identified to be collected and conducted interviews and surveys in these neighborhoods. So sharing with you some of the preliminary results of this is, so the first thing that has emerged over the discussions is the perspectives on electricity theft. So a couple of focus groups and individual interviews throws up different perspectives on the issue. So the service provider, the public utility, thinks that the defaulters who do not pay the money are either malicious or poor or both at the same time, and their operational limitations are they don't have enough staff or equipment to monitor the situation, and hence what they do is they enforce very high penalties as a deterrent. So their go-to action is to impose very high penalties on defaulters in the cases that they can identify. So the policymakers, on the other hand, are aware of the situation. They share the opinion of the public utility because, practically they are the same. They're the public utility is part of the policymaking infrastructure. But what you don't see is policy level action on preventing or mitigating the situation of electricity theft, because it's obviously a politically sensitive issue. From the user's perspective, what we heard from the discussions we have had with the everyday residents of Freetown is that the factor that drives them to think about workarounds, or where they hook a wire onto the line and just connect it to their homes or find other ways of getting connected, is because their applications for a connection, in the best case scenario, is a 6 to 8 month wait time for them to get the connection done. Or if the meter goes bad, it's a similar kind of a wait time for them to get a new meter, and they don't want to be without electricity during that period. Another issue was billing irregularities. So faulty meters leads to how bills, unrealistically high bills, which people don't want to pay, and then it gets tied up in litigation and back and forth, and that leads to either them being disconnected and they're hooking up illegally, or just not paying. So non-payments are all something that needs to be clarified here, that non-payments are also classified as theft. It's not purely having an illegal connection. You can have a legal connection and not pay a bill, not pay bills for 3 months. That would also be classified as theft. So looking at the different perspectives, which is obviously something that needs to be delved much more deeply into and needs to have more conversations around this with support of data. But what we think as our preliminary theory of change around this particular phenomena is that a significant amount of default can be avoided if the utilities invest in better communication channels, higher efficiency in grievance handling, and customer awareness and feedback processes. So that's something that we would pursue with the stakeholders as we get to the latter stages of the research. A second preliminary result that is emerging from the data, the interviews and the surveys that we conducted, is set around the problem of clean drinking water. So Freetown has notoriously bad and polluted drinking water quality. No one drinks the water that comes out of the tap or which is available from the municipal source. Practically every person buys drinking water in Freetown. And not surprisingly, and without exception, all our surveys point to the fact that it's the second highest household expense in Freetown after food. And you know, the more affluent households can afford it. It is not a significantly high percentage of their family income, but in poorer households, it is a significantly higher proportion of their entire family income. So this is a twofold problem. First is the economic burden on households, which has to purchase water, drinking water every month, every week, in fact, from their neighborhood store or from a supplier. And the second is plastic waste and pollution, because these drinking water supplies happen in plastic PET bottles in the best case scenario, which are also not recycled, get dumped. But the more worrying aspect is they get supplied in sachets, plastic sachets, like 100 ml to 250 ml plastic packets, which are disposed of everywhere. And if you go visit Freetown, you could see a large dump yard leading you into the city. So a landfill. So this is a double problem of plastic waste pollution and economic burden. So the provision of affordable and reliable electricity can usher in a culture of water filtration. Maybe at the personal level, people will be buying water purifiers for their homes, or it would make public investment in water purification systems more sensible because there's reliable electricity to run the filtration plants. And you know, a dimension of this is the health burden, which we have not explored in our initial surveys, but there are indications that there could be related health burdens, and which we would take up in the next phases of our research emerging from this. However, what is a concern here is, in case this transition happens, is a serious loss in livelihood activity for a number of people who are engaged in the retail and manufacture of drinking water products in and around Freetown. So there are at least 30 different brands available and multiple non-brand and non-standardized water retail stations that exist around Freetown. So the question, the dilemma for policymakers here would be to positively impact the economic and the pollution aspect of the drinking water problem, but they would have to balance it with the loss of livelihood that will certainly occur if this transition happens. So In the final phase of our research, which is scheduled to happen in the next few months, is we take this information that we create from the primary data collection and analysis to a visioning workshop, a futures workshop, which involves all of our stakeholders, and we present to them the options of creating this energy transition and developing scenarios of higher value creation in the country through energy investments. Now, with this information, it would be a question for the policy makers, the decision makers of the country, to identify what future scenarios are possible and which of those would be feasible to act upon. So in the process, not only we identify future scenarios of the energy system generating more value, but we identify those sequence of actions that needs to be undertaken by the different stakeholders to affect that kind of change in the future. So, and this is our intention of creating this platform as the final scenario development was to avoid jumping to techno-economic solutions without understanding the full socio-technical complexities of the problems and the potential solutions that people are going to propose during this process of participatory visioning. So, and we also understand that the stakeholders would make decisions or put forward propositions based on their normative position or their goals, because as entities they have particular mandate and goals to achieve, so they would be restrained by those factors, and we wanted to bring them out at the decision-making process to minimize assumption-based decisions happening there. So finally, what we seek to achieve out of this multiple stages and different formats of engagement with stakeholders is to develop action pathways to a future energy transition that is based on evidence, and that the pathways that are formulated by reflection in a participatory setting. So energy transitions would inevitably happen in Sierra Leone and elsewhere, but it is up to policymakers, the civil society researchers to come together and identify what direction that particular transition should take. Especially now in this post-COVID rebuilding phase, there are several challenges that has re-emerged, like hunger, poverty would make a comeback, and they are making a comeback in situations like this. And there are competing demands on resources. We expect a lot of financing to be diverted from energy system modernization and transitions to meeting immediate challenges like that would go into subsidizing food or subsidizing loss of jobs in many cases. So there would be competing demands. And that, in fact, makes the argument for investing in energy systems that return a much higher social value even stronger. So to develop contextual and systematic understanding of how energy systems would maximize social value, it has to go through this identification of pathways that set off positive feedback cycles in situations, and that leads to better development outcomes for communities and people in these settings. Thank you.